Alright, so we have been talking about this ongoing inflation crisis for a while now, and obviously a big part of that is gas prices. And so, as I've been covering on this channel before, relentlessly, we have basically gotten ourselves into a situation where a handful of mega corporations that are worth tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars, have essentially decided to price gouge the American people within the oil industry, but also this goes across the board, the food industry, big pharma, etc. And we've had a little bit of mild pushback from the Joe Biden administration on this, as well as some other corporate Democrats who are saying, hey, you guys stop that right now. Please stop price gouging us. Lower your prices at the pump, right? And it's been pretty pathetic, obviously. You know, Joe Biden put out a clip a couple days ago where he was calling them out and pointing out the fact that they are seeing record profits right now since they have been price gouging the American people. It's completely artificial. If you look at the price of oil on the global markets and compare that to when it was at a similar price point years ago, the price at the gas pump was like $2 per gallon less. And so the math is not adding up. These companies are essentially, again, just completely ripping off the American people. And we've gotten absolutely no legislative response from this, no real substantive response to this. But even with this mild rhetorical pushback from the Joe Biden administration, where he's saying, do your patriotic duty and stop price gouging Americans, as if like that's going to do anything, right? Even with just that mild pushback, we have gotten an absolutely perfect response from the fossil fuel industry. Okay, so this is from ExxonMobil, the single largest oil company here in the United States. And we got a quote here, okay, from one of their executives, the CEO. He says, there has been discussion in the US about our industry returning some of our profits directly to the American people, right? Doing something like a windfall profits tax and then redistributing that to the American people who they have been ripping off, right? Would be a great idea. But he says that's not necessary because that's exactly what we're doing in the form of our quarterly dividend. So if you don't understand what he's saying there, basically what he's saying is that, you know, his goal as a CEO, right, the goal of this company in general, under our model of shareholder capitalism that we have right now in the United States, their single solitary goal is to return maximum profits to the shareholders, right? If he doesn't do that because of, you know, even legal reasons that require them to act in the interest of their shareholders, if he doesn't do that, they're going to replace him with a different CEO. This is just the structure of the system that we have constructed with our economy, okay? And what he's basically saying is that us paying out quarterly dividends to our shareholders is the equivalent to paying money back to the American people broadly, generally across the board, and returning some of the money that we have just stolen from them by price gouging on oil prices in the United States. That's what he's trying to lay out here. I mean, this is like the most comical shit you could ever imagine. I almost thought when I read this quote that it was from like a fucking Onion article or something because of how ridiculous it is at face value. So, I mean, you guys don't need me necessarily to break down how stupid this is, obviously, but I mean, number one, just in terms of the stock market and the wealth, you know, this is not something that every single American citizen has investments in ExxonMobil stock and they're getting these quarterly dividends, which even if they did and you had a couple, you know, shares of Exxon, that wouldn't even be nearly enough to make up for the amount that they are price gouging you at the pump, right? In an aggregate sense. But even just beyond that, right? If you look at the overall stock market here in the United States, they say here from CNBC, the wealthiest 10% of Americans own a record 89% of all US stocks. Okay, so essentially 90% of the stock market is concentrated in the hands of the top 10% in this country. Okay, so how exactly is this you returning money to the American people? I mean, really, this is how stupid they think we are, okay? It's amazing that they can just get away with this with little to no pushback from definitely not Republicans, but even with, you know, Democrats as well. It's like finger wagging. It's like that old Hillary Clinton clip after the '08 financial crash where she, you know, gave that speech and she was saying like, you know, I went to Wall Street and I told them to cut it out, mister. It's like, this is just such a fucking joke that we are so cut to these for-profit companies that get to dictate something that both parties across the board say is a national security issue, right? Our energy costs for the American people, the price of gas at the pump, those are national security issues, right? So if it's a national security issue, why are we allowing them to do this to us? I mean, you look here from Public Citizen, they say, Shell, Exxon, and Chevron have raked in $104 billion in profits this year. In profits. Okay, not just their revenue stream. This is how much money they are fleecing the American people for. $104 billion just this year. This is why, okay, let's make it very explicitly clear. This is why you and other Americans have been paying higher prices at the gas pump. It's this. Okay, this is the single largest factor, and it's not even fucking close. Okay, they say that's more than triple last year's profits. Triple just last year's profits. Okay, so again, it's like this is a really simple situation that we're talking about here. All right, it's not because of some complex supply chain factors and, even the war in Ukraine and Saudi Arabia cutting their production. Okay, maybe that plays a little bit of a role in this, but if they're tripling their profits over just a year, well then that basically means and proves outright that they don't need to be price gouging us for the prices that they currently are at the gas pump. They don't need to be doing that. In fact, according to this, I mean, if they just cut their profits by a third, they could still match their profits from the year before and still be making ridiculous billions and billions of dollars in profits, and they would be completely fine. Obviously, it would be more than fine, but they could slash their profits by a full one or factor of 3, basically, or slash it by 2/3, and we would still be delivering ridiculous profits to them, and you wouldn't have to be paying the ridiculous, whatever, $3, $4, $5 at the gallon or per gallon at the pump that Americans are paying depending on where you live in this country, right? So, I mean, they say inflation has always been an excuse for their greed. And this is something, again, I'll refer back to that video that we covered with Katie Porter and her famous, little whiteboard breakdowns that she does. And it's not just the oil industry. This is across the board. This is what everybody is getting wrong about this entire inflationary period. It's not just because of supply chain breakdowns. That was a major factor, sure. But it's not just because of an increase in supply side costs. In fact, it is an outright majority of inflation across the board that is just being driven by these fucking capitalist ghouls. Okay, that is the situation we are facing. And so the actual solutions that would be on the table, we're going to get to a couple that have been proposed here in a second, are very obvious. Okay, you go for the profits of these companies. You disincentivize them by force so that they are not incentivized to price gouge the American people and just know that they're going to get away with it, because the worst that they're going to have to face is like a little bit of public backlash and Joe Biden getting up there and wagging his finger at them. I mean, it's just so ridiculous that this is a situation that we're in. And just to give you an example in terms of sort of this virtue signaling or this hollow platitudes of what we've been seeing from the Biden administration, he actually responded directly to this statement from the Exxon CEO. He says, "Can't believe I have to say this." Why is he tweeting like he's a fucking 18-year-old on Twitter? "Can't believe I have to say this, but giving profits to shareholders is not the same as bringing down prices for American families." Yeah, no shit, Joe. I mean, really, no shit. What do you expect these companies to do? Again, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. You're not just going to be able to scold them publicly and say, "Can't believe I have to say this, but this is not the same as bringing down prices for American people." It's like, yeah, they could give a shit about the American people. Are you kidding me? They've been spending the last couple of years just straight up price gouging people. Okay, they're using this narrative of inflation that has been aided and abetted by Democrats and Republicans alike to justify arbitrarily jacking up their prices because they know they can get away with it. And you, by just giving out these tepid statements here, you're enabling them to do that. You have to actually do something legislatively to force them to stop price gouging the American people. It's not going to happen by magic. This is their legal responsibility, is to use opportunities like this to deliver maximum profits to their shareholders. That's what capitalists do. Okay, that's what the structure of shareholder capitalism is supposed to be doing. Okay, so again, this is a structural problem. This is a systemic problem with the way that we have oriented our economy. All right, if you actually wanted to do something about this, well, what could you do? If you wanted to do some, milder steps here, you could look at what Ro Khanna just recently proposed. Just actually today, this article came out from Common Dreams. They say Ro Khanna unveils bill to ban U.S. gas exports as big oil rakes in record profits. They say the California Democrats' bill would temporarily bar U.S. gas or exports when prices at the pump are high, like they are right now. Okay, this is one thing you could do. Okay, why are we one of, if not the single largest oil producers in the entire world, and we're exporting all of this oil into the global market purely to enrich these wealthy billion-dollar fossil fuel corporations when they could be using that on the U.S. market and then increasing the supply domestically so that the prices would eventually maybe come down, right? But again, that kind of overlooks the main problem here, which is that this isn't necessarily a supply side problem. This is a capitalist problem. Okay, so this is something you could do to try to disincentivize them from price gouging the American people and really up that supply here domestically. Another thing you could do, and this would be much more substantive, was put forward by Bernie Sanders. They say Sanders introduces legislation to reinstate the World War II windfall profits tax to combat rising inequality, inflation, and corporate profiteering. So he was actually proposing this for like multiple different sectors, not just the oil industry, but this is what you could actually do in a substantive way to address the problem. You have to force them. You have to disincentivize them using legislation to make it so that it is not worth it for them to price gouge the American people. Okay, and so if you did a windfall profits tax, which basically just means you're taxing excess profits from them, and then you could use those funds to then maybe, I don't know, pay an actual dividend to the American people broadly, not a stupid stock dividend, which that Exxon CEO was just referring to, which like, I don't know, maybe 1% of the population actually has investments in Exxon Mobil, but that's something you could actually do, right? Cut into their profit margins, make it impossible for them to justify forcing these prices on the American people, instill a little bit of fear in them, maybe, right? I mean, that's what you would actually do. And in the broader scopes, like long term, this is why I brought up the national security point, which they always talk about, Republicans and Democrats, that this is a national security issue. This is why I brought that up, is because in a long-term way, we should be nationalizing these industries. Okay, these industries, we don't benefit from this. The American people, the working class in this country, don't benefit from having multinational corporations, fossil fuel companies, getting to dictate the prices of our energy, our gas at the pump. We don't benefit from that because their only goal is to deliver maximum profits to their shareholders. That's it. Okay, they don't have the best interests of the American people at heart. You have to force them to fall in line with what you want them to do. And if you're not willing to go all the way to nationalization, which is the logical answer, same as we should nationalize all public transportation, same as we should effectively nationalize our healthcare system, same as we should effectively nationalize big pharma, all across the board. If it's an industry that is either a national security issue or it's a basic fundamental human right, which, healthcare that would apply to, housing that would apply to, pharmaceuticals that would apply to, etc., right? If you actually wanted to address this in a long-term way, in a meaningful capacity, then treat it as a national security issue and nationalize these industries, okay? But instead, all we get is just this pathetic, tepid, half-assed Joe Biden statements where he's finger wagging at them on Twitter and saying, please, fossil fuel daddy, please lower your prices for the American people so maybe it'll help me politically going into the midterms. It's so fucking pathetic that it's insane.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying